Okay, welcome to 11.7. In this lesson, we're actually going to start drawing diagrams when it comes to light, and specifically plane mirrors. A few things that I want you to keep in mind, actually a few things that I want you to have before you do this lesson. Please make sure that you have a pencil, a sharpened pencil actually, and a ruler or another sharp-edged surface that you can use as a ruler, because those are very, very important in this lesson. So in our previous lesson, I distinguished between a plane mirror and a curved mirror. So the focus of this lesson is going to be a plane mirror. And if you recall from our previous lesson, a plane mirror is drawn by drawing a solid line and a bunch of small lines angled this way. So this is my plane mirror. And if you look at a plane mirror, you know that you are going to see a reflection on the other side. So if you start off with an object like a pencil, what you'll see on the other side of the mirror is an image. So this is a big distinction that I want you to start making from this lesson onward, is that you're always going to have an object and an image. So let me just identify. So in this case, you've got an object, right? This is my object, this is my image. And what you are going to be doing in a lot of these diagrams is drawing the image. The object is almost always going to be given to you. You have to use your lines and then be able to predict the image. Okay, so let's actually make sense of this. What is actually happening when you look at a mirror and you see a reflection there? What is taking place is that there are incident rays coming from the object. So those are traveling from the object towards the mirror. And when it hits the mirror, it is then reflected, and it's reflected back to your eye. So if we're talking about light rays, what's actually traveling are the light rays from the object, and then it's being reflected into your eye. Those are what the light, or that is what the light is doing in this scenario. So what you see there behind the mirror is actually an interpretation from your eye and your brain working together. So your brain or your eyes are extending that ray of reflected light beyond the mirror to create an image behind that mirror. And in a scenario like this happens quite often, this is what we call a virtual image. So this is an image formed by light coming from an apparent light source. So light is not arriving or coming from the actual image location. So the reason why we've shown these dotted lines is because light is not actually traveling behind that particular mirror. Your brain is just making sense of it. It's just interpreting it in this particular way. All right, so let's do some practice. So I'm going to give you this object, which is a pencil, and I want you to draw the image on the other side of the mirror. Now, this seems pretty easy, but there are some steps that I think you should do or take for this to be even easier. Okay, so this is sort of an easier way for you to draw this. The first thing that I want you to do is draw an image behind the mirror. Before we drew our lines or our arrows or incident ray or reflected ray, we want to draw the image itself. In order for us to do that, we are going to measure the distance from one part of the object to the mirror. So I'm going to pick the top part of the pencil to the mirror. I'm going to measure that distance out. I'm going to make up a number. This is not true, but it helps to sort of visualize. So whatever, if it's 7 centimeters, that is the distance from the top of the pencil to the mirror. I'm going to do the same for the bottom part of the pencil as well. So let's say this is 5 centimeters. So I've measured both of these distances out. Now what I'm going to do is draw those lines on the other side of the mirror. So I'm going to draw a 7 centimeter line behind the mirror. and also a 5 centimeter line behind the mirror. So I know that where the 5 centimeter line ends, that's where the eraser part of my pencil is going to be. And where the 7 centimeter line ends, that's where the pencil part of my pencil is going to be. So that's how I've drawn my image there. So my first part of this is done. I've actually drawn the image. Now I have to work backwards to be able to draw those arrows that I showed you in the previous slide, right? So the incident ray and the reflected ray. In order for us to do that, I want you to connect the top part of your object, or one part of your object, to your eye and draw a line that way. Now you will notice that I'm drawing this line. On the left side of my mirror, it's a solid line, and behind my mirror, it's a dotted line. So I've made this sort of line from my eye to the image. I'm going to do the same with the bottom of the image and my eye, somewhere there. So I've got 2 lines here. Again, for this line, I've got on the left side of my mirror, I've got a solid line, and then on the right side of my mirror, I've got a dotted line. Now, I'm going to then connect, the top part of my object to this part of my mirror. And I know I'm going to connect it to this line because this is the line that ends up connecting the top of the image. So I'm going to then connect that line and then do the same for the bottom of my object to the point where this line meets the mirror. Okay, so what I've done is now I've worked backwards to draw these lines in place. I'm just going to emphasize the arrows of these lines. So the incident ray is coming from the top and bottom of the object, and then it hits the mirror, and then it's going towards my eye as the reflected ray. And what my eye is doing is interpreting these reflected rays and extending it back so that I can see an image behind the mirror. So that is my first example. So I've had an object, I drew my image on the other side of my mirror, and then I drew my lines after. Let's try this again with a different example. This time, my object is a square. Just like I did earlier, I'm going to measure the distance from the object to the mirror. And I'm going to recreate that image on the other side of the mirror. So I want to make sure that these lines, so this line and this line, are of equal lengths, and that this line and this line are of equal lengths. Something else that I want to do is I want to make sure that I've got the exact the object exactly replicated as my image. So say, for example, that this is 2 centimeters for this side. I want to make sure that when I draw the image over on this side, I'm doing 2 centimeters as well. So I've drawn my image. Now I'm going to have to draw those lines. Just like I did for the previous one, I'm going to connect a line from my eye to one side of my image. Again, making sure that on the back side of my mirror, I've got dotted lines. Doing that for both edges in this image. I'm then going to connect my object to the point where those lines hit the mirror. So to emphasize the arrows, just one more time, the arrows, the incident rays are coming from the object and it's moving towards the eye. Okay, so that was my second example. So this is how you would draw an image for a plane mirror, right? So you have to recreate the image. You also have to make sure that those lines are showing how your eye is able to see this particular image. A few things to keep in mind. When you're drawing images in plane mirrors, you want to make sure, number one, that the distance, I guess I can number that. The distance from the object to the mirror is equal to the distance from the image to the mirror. And if you were following along with our diagram, this is something that you already know. So you want the distance from the object to the mirror, so this particular line, to be equal to the distance from the image to the mirror. So this line has to be equal to this line. And also, you want the object image line to be perpendicular to the mirror surface. All this means is that you want these lines that you're drawing to be as straight as possible. If you don't draw them straight, what you're going to end up creating as an image is going to be a little bit inaccurate. So you just want to be careful that you're drawing those as straight lines. So this is my second point here, now that I'm numbering this. Okay, so just keep those two things in mind as you're making these drawings. So does this mean that if you look at a mirror, what you're seeing is exactly the same as what the object is? Not quite. The image that you are seeing is actually what we call laterally inverted. So it's a little bit same, or most of the components are the same, the arrangement is a little bit different. So lateral inversion just means that the orientation of an image in a plane mirror that is backwards and in reverse order. So if I hold up the word science in front of a plane mirror, I'm going to be seeing in the mirror the words reversed, right? That's because there is a lateral inversion when it comes to plane mirrors. Okay, for this particular slide, I want you to put a little star next to it. I want you to understand this really well, because for all of chapter 11, and actually even for chapter 13, we're going to need to know about SALT. So SALT is a method that is used to describe images. So we just drew images compared to objects. That is exactly how we are going to be describing these images as well. So SALT is an acronym, so I'm going to write in what these descriptions mean. So S stands for size. So the size of an image is a comparison to the object. So the size can be smaller than the object, it can be the same size as the object, or it can be larger. Now notice that all of these options are a comparison to the object, right? So I'm describing the image by comparing it to my object. The description of it, of A actually, is attitude. My options for attitude are either upright or inverted. So you're just making a comparison of the image to the object to see if it's the right side up or if it is upside down, inverted. L stands for location. And I'm not actually going to fill in the options for location because it's usually a distance. So it would be a measurement sometimes. We'll look at more scenarios as we do more of these drawings. And lastly, T stands for type. And type, we talked about earlier, a virtual image, right? That is what we mentioned earlier. There's also another option, which is a real image, which we will look at when we do our next lesson. So for SALT, SALT is a method to describe images. It's an acronym that stands for size, attitude, location, and type. And we would use this anytime we create an image or we draw an image. We are describing the image using SALT. So let's do this as a practice. So every time we draw an image in a plane mirror, we're always going to have the same SALT. So when it comes to S, the size of the image that we produce is always the same as the object that we have. So in the case of our pencil, as well as in our square, the size of the object and the image were exactly the same. The attitude, we're talking about if it's upright or inverted, and we already mentioned that it is laterally inverted. For location, all we're going to say here is that it is behind the mirror. And type, as we mentioned earlier, the lines or the light rays are not actually meeting anywhere to form that image. We are making that interpretation in our brains. That is why this is what we call a virtual image. So the image produced by a plane mirror are always going to be the same size. They're always going to be laterally inverted. They're always going to be behind the mirror, and they're always going to be virtual. These are obviously all in comparison to the object that you have. So same size as the object, laterally inverted in comparison to the object, behind the mirror in terms of the object, and virtual. That's it for our lesson. For homework, I want you to do page 493, numbers 1, 5, and 6.